Aloha kākou. We will get started in just about a minute. Like a pi'ina kala I hai, I ka velo ana kala, I ka mole ulule hua. Aloha nui kākou. Mahalo nui for joining us here tonight. My name is Ka'ano Iwak. I serve as the Senior Policy Analyst for the Hi'ialo Group at Kamehameha Schools, and I have the utmost pleasure to serve as a moderator tonight for our panel. This is the second panel of week 3 of Hawaiian History Month, Eola Kalahui Hawaii Culture-Based Education. And the purpose of this Hawaiian History Month is to educate the community about a wide range of topics related to Hawaiian culture and history, and of course to honor our Queen Lili'uokalani's birthday, which was on September 2nd. Tonight's panel, ʻŌlino Nei Mālamalama, Hcbe in the Future, brings together advocates, educators, and thought leaders to discuss emerging trends and challenges facing Hawaiian culture-based education in a rapidly changing world, and opportunities to redefine education beyond the classroom. Tonight, we are joined by 4 awesome panelists working in various corners of the Hcbe space. Aloha mai kākou. We'd like to start by learning a little bit about each of you. We have Elena, Farden, Kehau Abad, Daniel, and also Derek. So I will start, I will turn the mic over. We'll start with Kehau. Please provide your name, a title, and a couple of sentences about your organization and how your work connects to Hcbe.
Aloha no kākou. Hello, Kehau Abad. I work actually alongside Ka'anoi at Kamehameha Schools in Hi'ialo. The team that I work with is called Kealavi Kuomo'o, and we support collaboration among a wide array of Hawaiian focused kula and Hawaiian organizations, including ones in this call. And we are really pleased to be here. Mahalo nui. Oh, sorry, the entity that collaboration is the name of the entity of that collaboration is Kana'aukana. So we have to support Kana'aukana.
Mahalo, Kehau. Elena, why don't you jump in next?
Mahalo, ka'anoi, mahalo to everyone here. My name is Elena Farden. I am from Kaimuki, but I now live in Makiki with my family. So I am an urban Hawaiian, a townie through and through, and I currently serve as the executive director for the Native Hawaiian Education Council. We are a 501c1 created through an act of Congress for the Native Hawaiian Education Act, and our work mainly focuses on supporting our Native Hawaiian education federal grantees, as well as advocating for support for them in various ways, in technical assistance, in funding, and ongoing support. So our role in connection with Hawaiian culture-based education is really uplifting and supporting those programs that are meeting the needs on the ground with our kiki, our haumana, our kumu, and all of our ohana and kaiaulu. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Elena. Turning time over to Po'okumu Derek, Minakimi.
Hello, my kākou. E kala mai I disappeared for a little bit. For some reason, my Wi-Fi went out, but I'm back. And I currently live in Nuuanu, and but really have a second home at my workplace in Lāhui, Kanihoe, the ili of Kuahu'ula. And I serve the hamana, the ohana, the community of Kanihoe.
Mahalo, Derek. And last but not least, quite possibly tuning in from the coolest place ever, Daniel Kinzer.
Mahalo ka'anoi. My name is Daniel Kinzer, and I live in Makiki and work with Purple Maya Foundation, where I'm the lead community technologist and trying to bring cutting edge technologies and innovation mindset to Hawaiian youth across all the islands. And yeah, absolutely. I'll try to give a little glimpse. Let's see if this works again. I'm currently on board the EV Nautilus, and we're right in the heart of Maui Nui, looking over at West Maui with Lanai behind us and Molokai to our north and Ko'olawe to our south, and working on a really special Malama Mano project that I feel really lucky to be a part of. And I'm bringing a lot of youth from across the islands on board virtually with us now. And so Purple Maya really wants to, Purple Maya Foundation really wants to bring young Native Hawaiians into their futures with the support and help of technologies that are grounded in Malama Aina and Aloha Aina. So mahalo nui for having me and bringing me here to join you guys this evening. Aloha.
Mahalo nui, Daniel, and for sharing that quick glimpse of where you are in the middle of the kai. All right. To kick things off and to, as they would say, break the ice, I'd like to turn some time over again to each of you. 30 seconds to answer the following question. What is your favorite olelo no eau and why? And let's start with Elena.
Mahalo for the question. I'm so excited for this. So my favorite olelo no eau that I discovered recently is Eli Eli Kulana o Aina Ike, or profound is the nature of Aina Ike, in reference to someone who is respected for his or her knowledge. And I think of the layers of it with Eli Eli, to dig really deep, to be very deeply rooted and be profound. And then Aina Ike, or this land of knowledge or knowledge landscape, and how it looks at both our people and our land, or Aina, as living entities, living because there is so much rich, deep knowledge within it. And just being on this panel, I am just, good at with the rest of our panel here, this Aina Ike, this landscape that we have with digital media and innovation and entrepreneurship and Hawaiian culture-based education and leadership and administration. This is the landscape that I get to be in this evening on this panel. So I'm very, very honored and very excited for the learning that will happen tonight. Thanks.
Mahalo, Elena. Ho'okumu, Derek Minakami.
Yo, ke aloha ahoi ka kohivi ka ole. So about aloha, there it's like a mist, right? There's no mountaintop that it doesn't touch or doesn't settle upon. And I think about my mentor Pono Shim, who really taught me about the practice of aloha and how that's a continual skill that we have to sharpen. And in these days where patience is running so thin and anger seems to be quickly triggered, aloha really is the key to helping us become closer, helping us build stronger pilina, helping us really magnify the kuleana that we share. We're taking care of our keiki and taking care of this aina.
Mahalo. Next, let's go to Daniel.
Mahalo. I think, one of my favorites is familiar. He ali'i ka aina, he kaua ke kanaka. That the land is chief, and that if we can remember in education that we are raising up our community through learning to care for the land, to care for aina, to malama aina, aloha aina. And I think our education system will truly be culture-based and powerful. So yeah, I think that's definitely resonates with me as well as the others that have been shared already. So beautiful. Mahalo for the question, Ka'anoi.
Kehau.
Kui Kavelo. That's one of my faves. So that idea of embodying the velo of our most treasured kupuna, or our ohana, our Lāhui, our kaiaulu. It's an aspirational olelo no eau that I like to kind of keep in the top of my mind. And it's something that I always, when I think of the imagery that I use to hold that thought, it's the velo. So velo is that trait or that character, that ano, that heritage, that but it also means to flutter, like how velo kahai. So and you know how that sense of when the breeze starts picking up one side and it continues to velo all the way to the tips of that flag. So it's a way of imagining what we hope that maybe we can all do is, hang on to those best of the traits that we want to emulate and embody and have that velo through us.
Beautiful. Mahalo nui, ʻŌlino. And for those that are hip to olelo no eau, you'll notice that there's a part of one of the famous olelo no eau, Wau Hawaii ʻŌlino Nei Mālamalama, which speaks to the brilliance, speaks to the radiance, in comparing education to that dawning, to that brilliance, right? And what Hawaii can truly offer, not only to the keiki and ohana that live here, but to the world. Okay. In this section, we're gonna switch gears, and I have some questions for you individually. And we have some time, so no need rush. Go through it. If there's any, perhaps follow-up, I may ask a short follow-up. But we will start with Elena. All right, Elena, as the Executive Director of the Native Hawaiian Education Council, you do a lot of listening to make your funding recommendations. What advancements in culture-based education are our communities leading and calling for?
Always picking on me. That's okay. I will get you back. We do a lot of consultations with the community as part of both our statutory mandate for the Act, but also it's our core work and for us to be accountable, transparent with the community and our biggest touch point with the community. So we've done over, I think, 22 sessions, 118 participants this past year. The year before was just about 20 or 21 sessions, just about the same amount. And the biggest thing that we were hearing from community was that they wanted more Hawaiian culture-based education, Aina-based education. The reason for that is within the pandemic itself, many of the parents and students and teachers and families found that there were so many possibilities for Native Hawaiian education and Aina-based education in hybrid scenarios or programs where they involved full family, where they were outside in a safe area, not indoors. Because of that, they felt the pandemic showed so many opportunities that they could pursue or enhance education that many of them also talked about numerous organizations that are already doing the work, many of which are rooted within our immersion and Kaiopuni schools that have been doing that for such a long time. So they wanted us to see how we can take the lead in supporting those models. And it was super clear from those engagement sessions with community that now that it was seen what was possible, there was absolutely no way that they wanted to turn back to the way things were before. So part of that was to gain all of that insight and data from the community and put them into priority recommendations that we do each year for the US Department of Education. And so one of the priority recommendations we asserted was that Hawaiian language and culture-based education programs and frameworks and values must be seen as the very principle in addressing equity, resiliency, and SEL well-being for increased Native Hawaiian learner outcomes and closing the achievement gaps. When we shared that with the Department of Education, their question back to us was, what does Hawaiian culture-based education look like? And what does Aina-based education look like? So we shared with them some of the models of grantees that are currently receiving that and doing that, like Kikioka like Partners in Development, like Kulanea Kea. And they realized that they were already funding it, but they had no idea what it looked like or what it meant. So I think the next step that we see in this listening and working with community is not getting the community to understand it, but it's getting the federal government to recognize and understand it better.
Elena, you know, I was gonna do a follow-up, but in your wisdom, you already talked about it. In seeing that our community is going in this direction, and how do we get the U.S. Department of Education to come along? Okay, next, Kehau. Okay, Kanaiokana networks together dozens of organizations working to realize a Native Hawaiian education system. How can networks help us disseminate the tools for culture-based learning across our Pai'aina and the world?
So when Kanaiokana began its conversations, even before they had named themselves, and again, I just want to make clear, me and my team, we're the facilitators that support Kanaiokana. And so we're facilitating the conversations and seeing, you know, what it is that they wanted to do. Because really, we just got them together and say, hey, you guys want to work together, do stuff? Because we know that probably, yeah, and you guys are all way too busy to coordinate a whole network all by yourselves. So Kamehameha School said, okay, we're going to put a team on this, and they're going to help do this. So really, we were in a position of listening and trying to just facilitate that conversation. And what came through, and if you guys want to check it out, kanaiokana.net, and foundational, I'll put it in chat. This is the about section. Go. There's a lot that describes what it is that they saw as super important. And one of the things, so in answer to your question, how does that, you know, when people collaborate and come together, how can we mutually support each other, and what can come of that mutual support? And one of the things that they pointed to that has come into fruition, among many other things, is the idea that if you go through, they have pahuhopunui, their strategic priorities, and there were 7 of them. One of them involved being able to share with one another teaching resources, because in all of the different kula, and we all remember this, anybody who's had any time as a teacher, it is so much work to do anything in a culture-focused, Aina-focused, and certainly Makololo Hawaii context. To teach in that requires you to create all your stuff really from scratch oftentimes. And so we have all these kumu out there creating things, and we realize that, you know, here we are decades later, and our poor kumu starting off are coming into classrooms, and there's like, they're creating from scratch again, like what the heck? You know, where did all of that stuff from previous, you know, decades of kumu creating, where does it all go? And of course it's there, it's just, you know, it's not all sitting conveniently for the next generation of kumu to have. And so this Kanaiokana conversation coalesced around the idea of, why don't we create an online repository? And it's come into fruition. It's called waihona.net, and I'll go put a link there too. You guys want to check that out. So this is a place where kumu can come and share their learning resources that they've created with one another, so that and right now there's plenty on there, and the hope is that others will continue to share more. You'll see that the folks in this very call have shared some things too, so mahalo nui for that. And that's some concrete examples of what can come of that kind of collaboration. Mahalo.
Mahalo nui Kehau. Okay. Ho'okumu, Principal Derek Minakimi. At Kane'ohe Elementary, you've worked to bring culture and place-based education to your learners. What value can Hcbe have for learners from diverse backgrounds, whether being Kanaka, Native Hawaiian, Kama'aina, from here in Hawaii, or Malihini, those making Hawaii their new home?
So I'm going to tell a story, okay? that I think best addresses this question. About 6 years ago, we had this cohort of students that mainly boys, the majority of them of Native Hawaiian descent, yeah, moving up through from kindergarten, and all the way up. And as they're about to enter 6th grade, okay, all throughout that time period, we couldn't put them in the same homeroom. And thankfully, Kaneohe Elementary is pretty large, and so we can separate kids by different homerooms, because when we put them together, man, they were just so kolohe, and just teachers feared them. So as they're coming up, and I had a couple of teachers who pulled me aside and said, can we create a different setting for these kids? Can we create a different educational experience? So we talked story about what would that look like. We would use restorative practices so that we can start to build ʻŌlino with them. We would, on a regular basis, form a partnership with Luluku Farm and the Mahi'ai Mark Stride out there. And our kids will go out there once a week, and they'll put their hands in the soil. They'll learn to care for the ʻŌlino. They'll see what kind of impact that they can have on their community and on others. And we're going to immerse them in Hawaiian culture and expose them to indigenous knowledge. So, when I talked to the teachers, we made a deal and say, okay, we need to collect data on this. We need to see if this is something that's going to work, because in some ways it's very expensive, right? Because we're going to put more personnel in this classroom. We're going to have to figure out transportation as well. And when we finally got into motion and had these kids in the classroom along with several other kids as well, what we found was it was transformational. Attendance increased, tardies decreased, the behavior incidences decreased, the love for school, the love for learning went off the charts. Their academics got better. And I really believe it's because they could start to see themselves in the curriculum. They could start to see themselves in school and what they were learning. A lot of times the content is so foreign. When it's presented in a traditional Western context, they don't see themselves. And I think back to something that I mentioned my mentor Pono Shin, when he said that Hawaii is such a unique place. You think about just how you transform kalo into poi. You think about the makaha for the local ia. You think about just how the ahua is set up. And there's so much genius in the systems that the kupuna has set up. So much genius in that innovation. And oftentimes it's foreign to our students of Native Hawaiian descent. And when they realize that there's so much genius in it, that there's so much to be proud of, they themselves become more motivated to learn and to continue with that innovation. And so even for our students who were kama'aina or malihini, because they live off of the land here, eat the food, the fruits of the soil, because they drink the water, they too carry a kuleana to making sure that this space is sustainable. And when you can make that clear to them, that they are tied to the land as well, that making it vai is a kuleana that they carry, then it brings greater relevance, especially if they see that they can make a difference on others, their family, their community members, by applying what they learn. So I think that experience and that experiment now has grown from 6th grade all the way down to 3rd grade. And we're doing things, even down into kindergarten, having Mark and his ohana come and teach the students there how to create a mala, how to put their hands in the soil, how to, not only help the soil to grow and become fertile, but also to heal themselves. And for many of our Native Hawaiian kids, that past trauma that they carry forward just through their blood and their genes. You know, it is a sense of healing to be able to do that.
Hallelujah, Derek. Beautiful. And I can tell that the Haumana, the Kiki, and their Ohana are blessed for this vision of yours that's inclusive and rooted in Hawaii. Hallelujah. Last but not least, Daniel. As a director of the Future Navigators program at Purple Mai'a, you empower participants of all age groups to learn in various settings online and on the ʻŌlino. What place should HCBE have beyond the formal classroom setting in our homes and our communities?
Mahalo ka'anoi. And I just want to say I love how everyone so far has articulated the work in so many important ways. And I agree that so much of it, and I think the aim of Future Navigators was really to just help present that story, amplify that story of the genius that lives in the ʻŌlino here and in the people of Hawaii. And I think absolutely Hawaiian culture-based education lives in the home. It lives with ohana. It lives in the mala, in the lo'i. It lives in the lokaia. It lives in the waves, in the ocean, on the reef. It lives in all of our in community and in place, and it can look a little bit different depending on which way the rain is falling, from which direction the rain is coming and makani is blowing, and I think culture is tied to nature, and so how can we create opportunities for our families to learn together and communities to learn together in place? And I think that's vital. The schools are, of course, vital. It's where we send all of our keiki every day. We want to trust that they're getting a solid foundation, rooted in their place, rooted in the ʻŌlino and in the values of the ancestors. And we also need to think beyond those walls, not just in terms of school programs, but in terms of resourcing our community. As Elena so beautifully said, like, it's already here. And Future Navigators was just there to amplify. The people I got to work with all around the islands, they were already doing the things that we're talking about, right? They were doing this ʻŌlino education, culture-based education, and it was just a matter of connecting and amplifying and bringing that resource together to tell that story even more and let families access it together. And that was, I had, generations of, we had kopuna all the way down to the keiki out there and doing amazing things all over the island. So that was a real blessing, and I think it needs more attention. How do we bring resource to that network, and how do we connect schools to it, and how do we connect families to these opportunities to learn in their communities and their places together? And that, of course, is difficult and challenging for a lot of reasons, but I think we need to start elevating those as priorities so that ohana have even more time together, doing culture-based education together and building and co-creating whatever culture-based education is going to become in the future for Hawaii. So, mahalo for the question.
Thank you for the thought going into it, for sharing both your mana'o and your ike as you all continue to work through this space and find new things. Okay, now we're going to move into a portion where I have a few questions, and then, we can pass the mic around. Want to get everybody's thoughts. And we still have a lot of time, so take your time, don't need to rush. And hopefully these questions are engaging for you all, as well as the audience. Okay, first question. Through the challenging times of the pandemic, how has culture-based education been enhanced and augmented through digital connectivity? Since we have Daniel on our screen, why don't we start with you, Daniel?
Mahalo ka'anoi. I will just share a quick story. Right now we're running a course through Purple Mai'a Foundation called Malama Mano, because I'm here as part of a research expedition to study the shark population of Hawaii, rooted in the traditions of kahumano and our relationship to sharks here in the Hawaiian Islands. It's very special and unique. And there's a lot of local knowledge and mo'olelo that provide a strong foundation for any future science, any future kilo. So we're running a course to engage more opio and keiki in that. Our youngest haumana is 7 in the program. And we have haumana ranging all the way through high school, from 7 through high school through 17. But I have so many parents, so many makua, so many aunties and uncles. They have tutu who wants to come in class and wants to join because they have mo'olelo about the mano, and because it's online, because we're able to facilitate those conversations and experiences through digital media and through Zoom and through various technologies where we can bring them on board, invite them on board a couple of times a week, and man, all those stories get shared. And so now we're all kumu and we're all haumana, and we're just going into the ocean together to to share those stories and to connect with the kai. And I think that's really powerful. I think that's really powerful, that ohana connections and connections across the islands, because we have so much resource and so much opportunity on Oahu, but then also so many amazing things happening outside of Oahu as well. And how do we connect those? And so many amazing stories held across generations that don't have enough time to connect with one another. And so creating that time and space for them to come together around the digital resource. So the pandemic was hard in so many ways, but moving into this virtual environment, I think created some opportunities to reconnect and do some of the healing, that Derek eloquently spoke about. And I think that's been a real gift, So my favorite part of Malama Mano, I thought it was going to be the sharks. I thought it was going to be the research that I was doing, but it's just watching these families come together and all of the mo'olelo that they're sharing with one another, and all of the connections, watching these kids light up to hear, oh my gosh, my parents, my uncle, my grandma, they have connections to this thing too, and they're super excited. So yeah, I think that's really special, and we can figure out how to amplify those relationships. Of course, it's always nice to be together in person, but hopefully the digital conversations can spark more of that. Mahalo.
Let's move to Elena.
So hard going after Daniel, but I will do it. I'll be tribune and I'll do it for the group. I want to focus on the question around the digital connectivity, more so around connectivity than digital. I think that in what we're seeing from community and the experience that the council has had, that resilience and innovation are always going to be the constant couple and how we see Hawaiian culture-based education lifted, and more so in the pandemic, as I mentioned earlier. So one of our community consultations that happened in Molokai in Lanai was around the barrier of digital connectivity. So because they couldn't connect, they went back out into the aina, and it was the whole family being able to work in the land. What they found with that experience, not only the learning, the intergenerational learning that's happened, and then of course connection to aina, but they also found solutions to largely this sense of food insecurity. So we know nationwide that Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders make up a little over 20% of food insecure communities. So, but on Molokai and Lanai, the connectivity was more important to them than digital. Both are important, but because it was a barrier for them, they focused on the connectivity part in order to do aina-based, Hawaiian culture-based learning. It doesn't mean in the future that they couldn't look at ways that they would also support evolving this learning in digital ways. As we know, our kupuna love innovation, and they can take things to see how it might be relevant and keen to what we value and augment it that way. But I think in hearing these stories from that community, very, very different than you might have on Oahu that has most connectivity, but how did they do their connectivity together was really powerful for me within the council's work and being able to advocate for programs and funding and what that looks like. I think the larger challenging thing with the pandemic and how digital connectivity can help support or augment Hcbe is again going to be from a federal standpoint of funding. Our rural communities have very different needs and challenges than urban or Oahu-based sort of programs. And that's our focus in trying to understand what's the equitable resource and support to get them, meet them where they're at and get them to where they want to go. It doesn't have to look like Oahu, but we know that there's ways that they have already found to connect. So how can we support that better? Kanai'okana definitely, and Waihona is one way, and there are many other ways that are coming up. So it's being able to connect all of these strands and weave them together better. I think this panel and this opportunity to hear what everyone's doing is one way to do so. And that's maybe the larger point is our connectivity as a people and support for HCBE.
Wow. Let's go to Kehau.
When the pandemic hit, it really triggered a lot of positive things for our Lāhui in many ways. I think we were poised to make the most of it because of some fundamental pieces that were already in place. Like, we love to collaborate. That's like in our soul. Like we really, I mean, and so with the digital tools, it allowed us to collaborate. Even to a higher degree, and the pressure to collaborate, right? How do we get material out to keiki who, you know, might not have these kinds of resources? So there were a whole lot of people who leaned in and said, okay, we have a gap in content. Like, kids are like on computers, and like there's not been yet this whole flood of resources for them, and like, how do we fill that space with something valuable? And too, there was that other piece where we knew that Makua were sitting with them, right? They're like, the Makua are part of education in a different sort of way, because the keiki are at home. Opio, even, you know, the older kids too, they're at home. So what can we do? So people like, you know, shout out to Malia Nobrega and Akela LPO Crozier, Keola Chan, and they said, you know what, let's try and create some content. And so there was Lea Nue Nue that Malia did, where was webinars much like this, and inviting guests. Literally hundreds of people came in through these webinars to create content that could offer people some joy in their day, lots of rich ikena that kumu could use, or just that maybe it's for ohana learning. The aikole, that it was a talk story time, Makolelo Hawaii, that Akela led. Again, so many people were willing to jump in and say, okay, yeah, we know that our haumana, our keiki in kulakaiapuni settings, they're not hearing as much olelo. They're out of the classrooms and they're not getting as much olelo in their ears. How do we fill their ears with more olelo Hawaii? And so, they stepped up. Her po'o at the Kamehameha schools, Maui, let her, Scott, thank you, let Akela have all that time to do all of that work, and John with Malia at UH, similarly, Keola Chan guys with Hehue Viola, and they filled up a whole lot of need to have people talk to, Mauliola, how are we feeling? Because everybody was so like stressed out, right? And lots of stress. So they saw that, they saw the need, like, how do we malama our families? How do we, anger management kind, like, how do we do it in a way that it touches people in a positive way? And so they were trying to take care of those kinds of needs. The other thing is, organizations like stepped it up and said, okay, like we probably would have waited before we busted this out. But we know things got to get out fast. I'll give you guys one more treat. If you haven't seen this is super cool. So there's this whole site that some friends over in the Aina areas of Kamehameha have created. I hope it's coming through. So what they realize is that there's such a need for Hawana to get out in Aina, even if it's via a visual. And so here's an example of this holua kaneaka in Kehau, holualoa, actually, I think, sorry. And then you guys can see it, like boom by, go press play and enjoy it. It's amazing. But so organizations like these stepped it up and got things out at a faster clip because they knew there was pressure to try and connect our keiki to places and fill their soul with that kind of stuff. Yeah, lots of wonderful things did come out of a very trying and hard set of circumstances. So yay for our Lāhui. Everybody stepped it up.
Hulo. Mahalo Kehau. Okay, last but not least, Moʻokūʻauhau Minakimi, who I know has a unique perspective on this panel as a principal during that time.
Yeah, I totally want to echo, all that's been said before, because those are definite positive silver linings that came out of this pandemic in terms of virtual hoʻokaʻi, in terms of, organizations stepping it up. Like, for example, we have a partnership with Video Kalani Trust, who provided us with plants that that the keiki could, or hamana could take home and then care for with their family, and then document it over the computer through Google Meets or Zoom, so that they can all participate as an ohana in caring for that and learning to care for that. I sit on an organization with Mahina Paishandor, in Kolau, Aina Aloha, and they created a whole bunch of virtual hoʻokaʻi where kids could go out to places that they've never. I mean, look at where Daniel is right now. Like, who's gonna be out there like on a school trip? I wish that we could all experience it, but it's just not, feasible to a large extent. But to have someone out there and then to open that up, we had some of that, of course, when the worldwide voyage with the Hopulea, but now, so many more people doing those kinds of things, to bring the world into the classroom, and then into the homes now with the ohana. And then, fast forward to today, where we're in person, yes, but we're still utilizing a lot of that digital technology. I mean, think about parent-teacher conference. And for those of you with small keiki, and how many of you ever had to take off of work just to spend 15 minutes with your child's teacher, right? And then you got to go eat power ready. You can't go back to work, or if you go back to work, it's like, just the commute. Now with the distance communication technology that we have, we don't have to take off of work. We just have to step outside of our office, or maybe blur the background, right? Talk story with the teacher a little bit, and we're good. Every morning, our school, we do Pico, our oli that the students provide, as well as the oli that the kumu do in return, was written by our head custodian, Wally Campbell. And I thought, I better give him a shout out, because here we have, someone for 15 years, pretty much just stayed in his box as custodian. But then when we started that Innovation Academy, started to bring him in and really leverage the cultural knowledge that he had, being in the community, being community leader. He and his wife, they hakud oli for the students to talk about the different ili from where our students come from, bring back the old names. They haku the oli for our kumu to welcome the students onto campus and talk about Kuahu'ula, the special place that our school is located. That many believe, back to ancestral times, was actually a place of learning. And so there's a continuous history of teaching and learning in that location. And so right now we're broadcasting it to our families. Every morning we do people and we invite them in to Google Meet. So can you imagine, as a parent, you're able to now participate in that daily activity. And we also give a message of aloha in the morning that teaches the different components of aloha as taught by Auntie Pilakipaki. And so this week, for example, we're doing lokahi, and we're talking about what does lokahi look like, what does it sound like, and what is a challenge that we can do to find the common stories that tie us together. So, I think there's a lot of benefit that has come from carrying forward those technologies into today's in-person learning world.
Mahalo nui to all of the responses. Okay, who do I choose next? I think we'll go with Kehau. What aspects of brick and mortar teaching do we want to retain in the digital classroom? And which do you think we should discard or reinvent?
So for sure, all of the connectivity that comes in a real in-person setting, I think that's something that we absolutely want to always have. And connectivity in every way, right? Haumana to each other, and kumu and kula and wahi that they're interacting with. Nothing is going to ever take the place of that real connectivity. I think some of what is beautiful about the opportunity in the digital settings. I mean, ideally, you're able to have an in-person setting that brings in the full complement of technology tools to have the best of both worlds, and use them as their strengths suggest for the kind of learning that a master teacher would be able to create for his haumana. But if we are thinking about some of the, like, I'm just trying to think about what, and this is just me as a, like, how would I recast some things? I don't think I would do my on paper. I know I'm gonna go to tree killing hell in some way. I'm gonna catch it when yeah, on that day, someone's gonna ask me, how come you wasted so much paper as a kumu? But so I think that's something that, you know, it's amazing how we can use all of the digital tools to reduce that footprint of education. It really is when you think about the impact of education. That's actually like not an insignificant piece, but for sure that, and for sure some of the, I think about the red bleed that used to be on some of the papers that I got back as a haumana. And then, so I thought it was better that I was using some nice, you know, turquoise pen as a kumu. I don't think it felt any better for the kids to get turquoise comments either all over their paper. But the ways that we can interact with the, like a, you know, a Google Doc, and then, and you know, it just so much easier to provide a lot of the positive feedback that I think when you're writing, you're just trying to get all the, like, here's how to improve it kind of stuff. And, you know, so anyway, so I think some of the digital tools allow us to be, to more effectively get rid of some of the burdensome parts of teaching that were a drag for us as teachers, but I think they were also a drag for haumana too. There's tons more, but I'll be quiet because I want to hear what my friends have to say.
Wow, look, Daniel, how about you?
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're gonna have, someone might have to cut me off. So be prepared. Elena, it can be you. Yeah, I think, you know, the thing about the brick and mortar, it's never the brick and mortar, it's just a building, but it comes with a system and a mindset of rigidity, right? Of industrialized thinking, of, you know, colonized thinking. And I think for me, the thing that we have to leave behind, that the, you know, the digital resources and the connectivity that Kehau was talking about, and Elena talked about earlier, and Derek too, like that sense of collaboration, but in a fluid environment, right? Where you don't have to stop when the bell rings. You don't have to do, you know, you can work at different times in different ways that suit different ohana and different communities, and take advantage of new opportunities. It doesn't have to be so pre-planned. You know, the brick and mortar environment, the classic school environment, in theory, we're supposed to know what's going to happen like every day of the school year when the school year starts, but no good teacher operates that way. So why don't we free kumu and free families and free haumana to engage in learning in a way that feels natural and is healing to them and addresses their day-to-day kind of needs? And, you know, so I think that's, you know, I think that can happen in this sort of blended hybrid future very easily. You know, where things like the school schedule and calendar can stop being so overbearing, right? And so restrictive, and that we can actually, just have people sharing what they're learning as they go, hoike, right? And as they go, and we can credit those hoike, and we can say, okay, you're learning the things that you're supposed to learn in the time and the way and the places and the different parts of the ecosystem where you're learning, right? Not all knowledge is learned in one school. So I think that we have to kind of free ourselves from the restrictive mindset. Even as kids go back to school, it's not, we don't have to necessarily operate in that same mindset. So I hope we choose not to, more than we choose to continue that. And I think it's exciting. I saw a lot more fluidity, right, in the digital environment, and I think we could have expanded it even more, right, to really make sure that we're creating a healing and regenerative place and ohana focused environment when we're running our school programs or community-based programs. To me, that's Hawaiian culture-based education. So yeah, I think the brick and mortar piece is just the physical dimension, but the sort of systemic and spiritual dimension that goes along with it, to sort of shift that more oriented towards culture and family and place will be a big win for us. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Yeah, mahalo, Daniel. Yeah, I still, I'm not coming from a place of Ike, but I was shocked to kind of learn of the power of the bell schedule. And just doing some of the advocacy in education, I was like, the bell schedule is going to stop these kinds of connections from happening. So mahalo nui for touching on some of those things, Daniel. Turn time over to Derek, our Moʻokūʻauhau on the panel.
I want to, what Daniel shared, in terms of brick and mortar, it really is a mindset. It's not, there's aspects of a school that we want to keep as a safe place, as a place where kids can gather. Like when we had a learning hub during the distance learning time, because of course, Elena was mentioning, a lot of our areas in Kaneohe even, lack connectivity. And our kids couldn't get on to even learn. So we had to create this learning hub, but we also had students who were, our teachers observed them being abused verbally, in that process. And so we brought them in because, it was a high stress time, for a parent to be out of work, to be fearful of the disease, to have to manage like 5 different kids and their learning assignments. And so, just to help, we brought them to school and it became a place of refuge for many of our students. And I think that aspect of brick and mortar, of course, we want to keep. We want kids to feel like, it can be a safe place and it can be a place of inspiration for them. But other aspects like the mindset, like worksheets, that carries on even in digital format. You see people trying to do just digital versions of worksheets, and that got a goal. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if there's educators on there who just like love their worksheets, but it's the kids, our students, our haumana, they get excited when the learning that they have is real. It helps them to contribute to others and to the benefit of others, not just for themselves. When they can help their mom, they can help their tutu, they can help their neighbor. They're excited. They want to do those things. And I'm sorry, a worksheet's not going to do that. So that'd be one thing that I wish that we could entirely get rid of. Unfortunately, when we moved into distance learning, we had a lot of teachers who are still doing digital worksheets.
Mahalo, Derek. That was illuminating. Mahalo. Elena, last but not least.
I'm going to put that as one of the quotes. Remember, worksheets got a goal. It's just there anymore. Kāko'o, everything that was said of the bell schedule, paper, safe spaces. If I could add anything additional to what has already been so wonderfully shared, aspects to keep for the brick and mortar teaching would be equitable learning experience. So when our keiki are in the classroom, they all are in the same place. They can see the teacher in the same way, see the presentation materials in the same way. And then with connectivity, digital connectivity, sometimes the connectivity is a different way or different level for different students, depending on their access to it. So when there's a break in that connectivity or there's a lag in time, it affects that students' experience that's happening and that's learning. So if that brick and mortar part can be guaranteed or confirmed or just solid on the digital classroom, I think we are moving in that direction, and there's ways that we address that now. But I think that would be powerful for our students. The other part that I see for brick and mortar that also happens in the digital space is for our haumana to bring their whole selves. We do that already in digital spaces where we're seeing students in their own home. So we're mindful of what's happening in the background, that this is, every student's home will look different. Every student's environment will look different. But in the same way where students are in a brick and mortar classroom or school, we see the nuances of their personality, the changes in their behavior, things that we would want to, as teachers or staff or faculty, we notice the differences in students in order to either, as Derek had mentioned, have a safe space for them. And then the last thing I'll add, just something more pragmatic that we would want to bring from brick and mortar into the digital space, which I think there's ways that they have already addressed it, is just having free and nutritious lunch. I think that'd be good. Feed the tummies and they, you know that the kiki are gonna learn. So thanks.
Mahalo ʻŌlino for engaging in that question. Okay, for this next one, I think I'll go to Daniel first, and then pass it around. What is something that may be on the fringes of education through Hcbe now, but that will define education in Hawaii in the future?
Yeah, mahalo. Yeah, I think for me, in the work that I'm doing, it feels like, going back to this conversation about the genius and innovative nature of our ancestors and of our current keiki here in the islands. I think advanced technology and seeing that these new tools that are being introduced, wherever they've been developed, I think they're going to be in the hands and be redeveloped and remade here in Hawaii by our young people, by our teachers, by our practitioners, and they're going to be put to use to Malama Aina. And I think that that's going to be a strong feature of the future of Hawaiian culture-based education and education here in Hawaii. So now I see most programs are really rooted in kind of remembering and retaining and preserving and protecting cultural practice. And I think that's beautiful, and that foundation needs to be strong. And then as we move into the future, I think more and more we're going to see things like whatever the future of AI and augmented reality, virtual reality, all of these really interesting tools, whatever Web3 and the metaverse, I'm still a bit confused by all of that, but whatever that's going to turn into, I think, our young people and our young teachers, they're going to figure out how to remake that on Hawaiian terms and in benefit of the Aina and of the Lāhui. So I'm excited for that. I think that's going to be a really interesting development, and feel fortunate to get to play around in that space with Purple Maya. And kids are learning how to code in Python and build worlds in Unity, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is, and if the future of technology can be more Hawaiian for the world, then I think the world will be a better place. So yeah, I'm stoked for that.
Stunning. Beautiful. Mahalo. Let's go to Kehau to follow up, Daniel.
I think one of the changes that that will be happening, that I'm hoping for, longing for, as we imagine, the kinds of changes that can come as we look forward. If we consider what's already happening, so what's on the edges of Hawaiian culture-based education, like you prompted us with, some of the, well, let me put it this way. I think it's the unit of how we're thinking education happens. We're educating a lot of at the individual, like one to one to one to one. And what does it look like when we see the unit of education, like the way we're conceiving of it as a whole system of education? The unit of education is a family. The unit of education is a community. And how do we build education so that it's a whole community, it's a whole Hawaii, and it can't just be this child and this child, but when we design education, so learning is everywhere, and digital opportunities allow for that, right? What are makua bumping into on Instagram, Facebook, and how does it resonate with what keiki are learning in the classroom? And how do we get everybody vibing on, yeah, let's take care of this aquifer. What's going on at Kapukaki is in no can. And how do we turn that into policy? The kids are like down at the legislature hammering senators and representatives saying, you guys got to do something about this. And here's the data. And how do I know? Because in science, we learned about this. Check it out. There's as much fuel in those tanks right now as there would be in a 51-foot deep pool the size of Thomas Square. And that's not okay when it's leaking 90 gallons a day. Those kinds of things, how to, and parents involved. So the scale of what we're talking about when we think about education, who's involved in that? It's not just schools, it's everybody in the community and what's important to us. And the essential question when we think about, well, what are the essential questions that we want kids to be motivated by? What about an essential question like, what kind of community do we all want to live in? What kind of Hawaii do we all want to live in? What kind of honua do we all want to live in? And how do we create that together? And these kinds of larger scale things, like we're talking about this is happening in schools already, but how do we enable this and facilitate this at that larger scale? Because if the scale of education is more than just a student, it's a family, it's a community, what needs to happen so that there's this whole shift of everybody's need to get going and doing things so that we can create this bigger, better, wonderful place that we and take care of this wonderful place that we love, Hawaii and our honua. Related to that, just one last tag idea. The scale of who we bring into our circles, right? There's so many people who vibe like us as people of what do we care about? As a Lāhui Hawaii, what do we care about? There are lots of people globally who care about the same kinds of things. And how do we hook up with them? Like recently, there's been a lot of Hawaii and NDN collective hookup, and that's been really powerful. Lots of other examples, but how do we connect with like-minded folks around the globe and work with them at that even bigger scale? So just some thoughts of what's on the fringe that I think got some momentum that would be really exciting. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Kehau. Derek?
I was thinking something about Daniel. Daniel said, he referenced that ʻŌlino ea o he paukaike kaha halahokahi, right? That knowledge comes from many sources. There's not just one school. And I think that's what Hawaiian culture-based education really teaches us that the kumu that's in your classroom is not your only kumu. You have your mom, you have your dad, you have your tutu, tutani, you have your neighbor, you have just, our head custodian is an amazing tool for our students. And I think, echoing what Kehau was saying too, that we need to broaden the aspect or the concept of school, and that it's everyone's kuleana, to extend that learning to be within the ohana and to branch out. I think about our community partners. We partner with Puliamahi, which is a partnership, which they themselves are a partnership, right? With Papahana, Pai Pai Wahia, and Kako'ibi. We partner with Waikulo Lokoia, and then also with the farm at Luluku. And in all of those, the students learn that there are, who is a kumu, who teaches them, and that the knowledge doesn't only have to come from a book. can come from a mo'olelo. It can come from observing the environment around you. It can come from the creatures that are swimming, in the shores below you. There's so much that they can learn, and that really is, I think, telling in terms of where our future is heading. And unless we can incorporate some of the wisdom of the kupuna, to make Hawaii more sustainable and to make it more vai-vai, things are not going to be looking good for Hawaii or for Honua. And so, the more that we can teach students that learning is a lifelong process, that teaching, they too can be teachers, and they need to spread that knowledge as well, to keep, or to bring pono back, into our aina and into our vai. It is so important, and that it is part of their kuleana, but it's also the kuleana of their ohana as well.
Hello, Elena.
Now it's ready to stand up. And AO during Kehau's velo, I'm like, yes, and I remember where I am. But yes, I think my response is so much less sexy than my fellow panelists, and probably a bit more selfish, considering the context of the Native Hawaiian Education Council and our advocacy work with the grantees. But I think something that we would like to see, or we know that's already on the fringes and probably already evolving now, is having more Kanaka data researchers and data evaluators, data scientists, data leaders. Oftentimes when we're working with our contractors and doing evaluations for the program, we have a hard time finding those that have a baseline understanding of our culture and language and importance. So there's a huge learning curve in getting them to understand why this is so important to us. And then also the large and deep need for culture-based education. We have the Hawaii Performance Assessment Coalition already doing great work in that effort, but it needs to be larger. And I think the larger data legacy or data genealogy that Kehau had touched upon about the advocacy work that happens with the students, where they know the data, they know how to interpret it, they know how to read it, is also part of our data sovereignty and governance, right? How do we ensure that we're aiming to design our data ecosystems that enable Kanaka Uiwi to attain individual and collective benefit? And then what's the authority and control for our future Kanaka data leaders? How do we maintain the inherent right to data relevant to our own worldviews and empower sustainable self-determination because of it? And then our responsibility as data leaders. How do we make sure that we're holding accountable the individuals and institutions and organizations that use, that create, that collect, that analyze, that manage or distribute data about us, to be responsible to the very communities from where the data is derived from, and give credit where credit's due. And then of course, the ethical and moral care for our own data is being able to acknowledge and name the structures that maintain and create and uphold inequity in data governance, whether it's intentional or unintentional, while we seek ethical ways to practice and address what these imbalances of power to protect against future harm of data use that stigmatizes or portrays Kanaka Uiwi in terms of deficient. I think that's happening because of Hcbe, and that I'm not asking for more data researchers or data genealogists or data legacy leaders. I'm asking for a whole army, because there's so much that's going to happen in our Lāhui where we need those leaders that understand and read data, that can advocate and interpret. They're alchemists, really. They're alchemists and translators. So that's going to happen. I'll put that onto the universe. And by next year, we'll have a whole army of data leaders in governance and data genealogists. Thanks.
Mahalo nui to all of you for those rich responses. I know there's one thing that digital connectivity doesn't mitigate or block, and it's receiving the confirmation within our na'au. And all of you touched on so many things that will no ho'i ko'u na'au. And I know that others listening are feeling the same thing. Okay, we have one more question, and I think we're on track to have some time for questions from the audience. So this may be the final question. What do you see as some of the most promising future prospects for an Hcbe ecosystem here in Hawaii? Start with Kehau.
I'll be really brief because I definitely want to hear questions. I'm going to shout out to my fellow panelists here. It's having more people doing exactly what they're doing. Like, I don't know if others might appreciate, but Derek over here, he's quite a leader in this area within the DOE. There's not tons of po'okumu who think and behave and run a school or lead a school like you do. And so the promise of more folks who are actually adopting Hawaiian culture-based education approaches as leaders and enabling that within their schools, that's amazing. That would be amazing. That's the promise for a new kind of landscape, because it's not the norm in the ecosystem. It really isn't. And I know there's so many people, many folks who are trying to make it the norm, and that, you know, mahalo nui to everyone. We have it at the policy level with all the kinds of work that you're doing, Elena, because you can't get that without people in those areas looking out for how to make that happen. And I think about everything that Purple Mai'a has done and all of your partners, Daniel. You guys are at the cutting edge of, you know, always pushing it out and saying, wow, how can we do things at this edge for all the beautiful and wonderful reasons of taking care of Aina and taking care of community and empowering learners. And it's, you know, when we talk about, it's a whole ecosystem, right? Purple Mai'a isn't a school, but man, are they educating, man, are they motivating, man, are they getting our creativity, you know, going. And that's the promise of our ecosystem, is to have more and more folks like this. And Ka'anoi, I'm going to do a shout out to you. I know you didn't have a chance to talk here, but you know, Ka'anoi plays such a huge role in our Kamehameha ecosystem in helping in all sorts of ways, among which is policy too. Like that's Elena and Ka'anoi know each other well, but both our boss, we have the same boss, and she's such an important, she's such an important part of the ecosystem of Hawaiian education, where we have leaders who are living it, who have raised their children in this ecosystem, and who are advocating from positions of ability to control resources in those directions. And that's not what we've had in you know, 20 years ago, a generation ago. There weren't people like Wai'ale'ale in the position that she's in. And of course, you know, Jack too, and you know, the whole gang of the folks that are leading in those places. But that's going to make a huge difference, having all of people like you where you're at. So mahalo to you guys for all you do.
Mahalo, Kehau. Let's go to Derek.
Mahalo nui loa. I feel so hopeful, you know, in hearing from all of you and efforts that you're making. You know, I feel like we're on the verge of an awakening, or maybe, you know, even within that awakening. You know, I read this super interesting article in Flux magazine about just the scientific knowledge that can be found in Mo'olelo, and they talk about, you know, the tales of Pele and Hi'apa, and how just within those stories, within that oli, there's a pretty accurate account of the volcanic eruptions that occurred in the past that were never recorded or observed, you know, by, of course, Western scientists. And so for many years, you know, people doubted that it was real. It's just a legend in their minds, right? And yet there's truth in there. Yet there is so much knowledge that we can gain from there. You know, I think people are beginning to accept that. And we look at the advancements that are being made by our Office of Hawaiian Education, what the HA framework for the DOE, you know, all of those things bring hope, you know, as we try to immerse our schools with Hawaiian education. I think what holds us back, though, and what keeps us from getting there, unfortunately, is there is a mindset still, that the arrogance of the power of Western education, and how, we need to test, we need to have accountability. And so teachers, they run themselves ragged, they do their worksheets just so that the students can do well on the test. But to what end? Does that really help our community? Does that really help our students to learn how to problem solve, how to work as a team member, how to collaborate, how to communicate, how to lead? Not really. I think we need to do more. So we're on that verge of an awakening, but I still think that we've got to push. We got to keep on pushing. And I want to mahalo my fellow panelists, because they're all such great examples and heroes in my eyes for those who are pushing the edge there, so that we can not just like tumble into this new era, but really go in running, and really go in strong. So mahalo to all of you. Mahalo for this opportunity. I really appreciate being here and being able to learn from everyone.
Okay, I'll kick it over to Daniel, and then we'll end with Elena.
Mahalo, mahalo. Yeah, what an incredible blessing to be here with all of you and everyone listening in and sharing their mana'o and ike. There's a lot of obstacles, right? I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Like, there's a lot of obstacles to moving Hawaiian culture-based education forward. We're a culture that's rooted in resilience and adapting to change, and at the same time, part of the story of colonization is that we became even reluctant to change. And so I think that change can be difficult in some ways, but at my heart, I'm just a nature lover. I love the ʻŌlino, I love being in the ocean, and I think our language and our culture in Hawaii is born out of our relationship with everything around us. And so the biggest obstacle to me in advancing Hawaiian culture-based education is the health of the ʻŌlino and the health of the ocean that we depend on, that we live in, that we're a part of. And we're going to have to turn our genius to that. All of our powers of innovation, all of our creative powers, all of the wisdom of the kupuna, all of our ancestors, we're going to have to really turn our attention to making the ʻŌlino healthy again, the global oceans healthy again, our relationships with all of the natural world and with each other healthy again, that healing that Derek spoke about earlier. And I loved how Kehau framed, like, education is going to have to become about family, about community. We're going to have to think about the unit of education and learning differently. And that's going to be the most natural thing in the world to do. And also, ironically, one of the most difficult things to do moving forward. But like Derek, I'm filled with hope. It's such a, excuse me.
Daniel. Overcome by the Hcbe vibes.
Rather go drink Hawaii. You got Hawaii.
I don't have with me now, but I'm okay. Yeah, I'll pass it over to Elena, but just stoked to be here tonight.
Elena.
Oops. It is an honor and a gift to be with all the ʻŌlino ʻike on this panel, the ʻeli that you folks shared. And knowing that I am really here just representing the organization. By no means, I think, has my life work been as deep and profound as my fellow panelists. So I am excited for this awakening, and also the community being the school versus the school being the school. I think the next iteration or the future for the ecosystem is built on extending that family. So yes, we see our kumu and the schools and our families as usually the main pillars in ushering education. But I also feel in that same sense of community and family that we have to extend that, so that responsibility is owned by nonprofits, by our local businesses, by our state government. So if I had to share a model that has been a pillar in the community that sort of shows the future of the ecosystem for HCBE, it would be a Hapunana Leo, because of just their longstanding work in language and culture, but their focus on early education, their work with communication with parents, their intergenerational learning. And because of their long work, and not to say that Hapunana Leo is the only one doing this, but because of their longstanding work, they had to become policy advocates. So they are experts in all of these areas that could be and serve and do serve as a good model for all of us to see how we can deepen that, expand that, and scale it for all of us. Mahalo.
Awesome. Mahalo nui to you all. We do have 2 questions in the chat, and I will read the first. We'll pass the mic around. You know, if any of you want to jump in, you know, if not, I'll let you kia. Okay, this question comes from Mike Sarmiento. Many of you know him. I do know him as well. He's tuning in on Facebook. How might we attract, grow, and support and elevate more Native Hawaiian educators?
I'll jump in first. I'll be the tribune. So mahalo to Mike for the question from the greatest graduation class from KS Kapalama that ever was. We pay them more. We pay them more. We value them more. We make sure that they have housing. We make sure that they have training. We make sure that they have a mentor support in their whole first year. Many of these things I believe are already in the works, but how do we make sure that it's statewide? We grow our own teachers. Those are programs that are already exist. But I think first it has to start that we value the profession in the way that it should be. They're paid more, they're valued, they are needed, they're respected, they are pillars in the community, they're grown, they're homegrown. So that is my 2 cents.
I can jump in next. You know, I look at our Haumana as hua for those future educators. And I think when they see that they too can be cool, that they too can teach others, especially for family members or the younger keiki, you know, how to utilize and apply their knowledge to benefit others. Then they find the joy and the passion in teaching. And I think we have to really redesign what school looks like in order for that to happen. Because if we stick with the Western context of just everyone sitting in molten columns, everyone doing worksheets, they don't have that opportunity to experience that. But if we embrace culture-based and place-based education, if we get them to solve problems, work together collaboratively, and get them to present and to teach others, then they see those models, and you know, and also do the things that you know, pay them more, provide housing, make it a secure future, you know, and then they can see themselves in that role.
Kako Piha, the comments that have been shared on this question, an and might be the retention issue. How do we keep them once we have attracted them? And I think it would really be an extension of Elena's answer. You know, after at certain key milestones, mahalo them like big, like, whoa, you've been around in this system for 10 years. The value of your work is not just the incremental increases, but like bigger, better, more, because they really do deserve it. It's one of the hardest jobs in the world, one of the most rewarding, but super, super hard. And then providing them more resources, because they're, like we were talking about at the beginning, right? They spend so much of their own time creating all of this. Pay them the time, pay them extra during the summer, give them the opportunity if they can. I mean, not everybody's going to want to take that time to do that kind, but acknowledge that there's these extra hours that are above what other kumu might be expected to do. And so provide them that support for that extra time that they're taking.
I love all of these answers, and I think thanks for being patient with me, Elena, and you beautifully taking over one of my coughing episode. But I love all these answers, and I also like to think outside of the context of school and educators and kumu as we traditionally might define them. I don't think there's a shortage of kumu. Even Native Hawaiian kumu, man, I think every Hawaiian, every Kanaka I talk to, I'm like, oh my gosh, got so many stories, you got so much ike, you got so much cool perspective. And I think it's just a matter for me of redefining what we mean by kumu and how we get access to people, right? There's some obstacles. You know, do we need all kumu to have graduate certificates or degrees in education? No, I don't think we do. I think we can have kumu who have lots of different kinds of experiences. I think we can send our kumu places. We can put them in places which not a classroom, because I know plenty of amazing kumu who just not going to sign up to work in a school because they don't want to go sit in a classroom for most of their day. They want their hands and their toes and everything in the dirt or in the water, in the vai and the kai. And I think that, you know, those are really, really valuable kumu. I mean, I get to sit here on this amazing ship over here in Maui Nui, and I get to teach from here. And how can we create more opportunities for people to be, you know, on the water, on the aina, in community, in places, teaching both in person, virtually. We have all the resources to do that. And it'll, by changing what we think when we think of teacher, like, oh, I have a lesson plan, I'm going to deliver my lesson plan in class to one group of students today, to have a more fluid ecosystem where kumu are living and thriving throughout that ecosystem and generating mana and resource for themselves and their communities in lots of different ways. That's a longer road, I think, and I agree with everything that was said before. I think we value and cherish, even in the traditional ways, the kumu and educators that we have, and I love this idea that let's start talking to our. I saw a report recently that most teachers don't want, most kumu, it was from the continent, but most teachers don't want their own kids to become teachers. I said, man, you know, how do we actually talk to our young people about we are all kumu, and all of us have a responsibility to pass on our ike, pass on our mana'o. We have to do that. And Derek, when you were talking about that, it was really beautiful. So yeah, mahalo. It was a great question and super important question. But
Awesome. Okay, there's one more question, and we have like 1 minute. So lightning round, 15 seconds each. And this comes from Craig Oliver. How is the Hawaiian-based curriculum used to encourage students in STEM programs? And we're going to start off with Daniel.
all right, 15 seconds. Well, I'll just make it a plug for Purple Maya programming. If you go to Purple Maya Inana, Kaikaina, we are running some incredible technology programs. I know there are groups across the state doing really cool STEM and STEAM and all the acronyms, different kinds of project-based learning rooted in Hawaiian culture. And I think, you know, we just got to get our kids into those places, playing around with science and technology, becoming, you know, Hawaiian explorers and navigators and technologists. And so find, you know, there are quite a few programs, and I love what we're doing at Purple Maya, and we'd love to see you and your Keiki and Opio. We'd love to see them in the courses. So mahalo.
Mahalo, Daniel. Okay, for the other panelists, if you have any mana'o, please put it in the chat. We are winding down. Mahalo nui to all of you, Kehau, Daniel, Elena, Derek, for taking time off this Friday to come together around Hcbe. So many things bubbling to the surface: ohana, community, a deep love and tie to Hawaii, and wanting to do what's best and needed for Hawaii. So mahalo nui to you all. I know there's more thanks and well wishes coming in the chat as well. At this time, we'd like to share a mahalo to our sponsors. This concludes our week dedicated to Hawaiian Culture-Based Education. Hawaiian History Month continues next week with the exploration of the teaching of history in K-12 curriculum. I Kawama Mua, Kawama Hope, Hawaiian History, its past, present, and future. Join us next Wednesday at 6 p.m. for History in Crisis, History in Focus. What history does Hawaii need and why does it matter? And I will drop a link in the chat for those with us in Zoom to sign up if you're interested. So mahalo nui Kamehameha Schools, we have Papaola Lokahi, all of these different organizations coming around this. And what a wonderful panel, beautiful night. Everybody be safe. Aloha, ahui ho.